I walked out with a tray of lemonade and found a red carpet across my lawn, a DJ testing bass by the pool, and a woman in a sequined blazer timing models as they practiced turns on my diving board. My pool. My board. I did not shout. I saved shouting for fires and snakes. Today was only an HOA fashion show invading my Saturday. I raised one eyebrow and set the lemonade down like evidence. The woman in sequins was Marla, our HOA president, who believes every problem is a stage and every stage is hers. She saw me and smiled like I was a caterer delivered late. "There you are," she said. "We need the patio lights on for the photographers, and could you move that chair? It ruins the symmetry." I looked at the banner, the backdrop, the programs that said Lakeside Collective Spring Showcase. Strangers drifted through my gate like they owned the place. Someone had set up a seashell bar. Someone had swapped my towels for stacks of identical turquoise ones. A drone idled over the deep end. "Interesting," I said. "Do I get a cut of ticket sales, or only the privilege of supplying eyes?" "We emailed you," Marla said, tapping her clipboard. "Twice. The community has an event easement. The gate was open. You will be compensated with 2 drink tokens and a mention in the brochure." She produced a program where venue graciously provided by a supportive neighbor appeared above a shell company with an address that was not mine. "How many people?" I asked. "Only VIPs," she said. "The judges. The sponsors. Their guests." The first model stepped onto my diving board in a gold suit with a train that ignored physics. A photographer knelt by my planters and yelled for drama. The model gave drama and knocked a glass into the pool. The glass drifted like a lazy jellyfish. I like a tidy life. My pool chemistry is tidy. I learned it during years of swim meets and a summer fixing disasters. I could balance pH in the dark. So I asked who approved this and which office signed a permit that says my deck is a public runway. Marla slid out a page. "Temporary Community Use Authorization," she read. "Authorized by the event committee." The signature belonged to her. The stamp was the kind you order with free shipping. 2 men posed by my skimmer pole for photos. I texted my neighbor Rob, who answers faster than a smoke detector. He sent a photo of a flyer at the clubhouse. It said the showcase was at the Lakeside Club. Rob added that valet was parking cars on my grass. He included a shot of a yellow vest guiding an SUV over my sprinkler head. I told the vest to stop. He laughed the way people laugh when they know a higher authority will applaud them. He pointed at Marla. She gave a nod. I heard the sprinkler crunch. I felt the click of a chess clock. I am not a yeller. I am patient, with a memory for details and a taste for timing. If I must host a performance, I prefer to choose the ending. I poured lemonade from my own pitcher and tasted it like a judge. My sister Clara called because Rob had sent her the runway photo. She is an ER nurse and allergic to nonsense. "Want backup?" she asked. I told her to keep her phone on and send me a shot of the HOA bylaws, page 23, the one that defines common areas. Marla climbed onto a portable mic and welcomed everyone. She thanked the sponsors and something called generous cooperation. I was not thanked by name. Judges arrived with clipboards. Influencers filmed from my deck. A caterer blocked my hose with ice buckets for a fog machine. When I asked him to move, he said water pressure would mess with the schedule. I walked into my garage. On the shelf above my workbench is a gray tackle box that does not contain tackle. It holds labels, O-rings, test strips, notes, and a legal dye pool text used to trace leak. The dye is harmless and vivid. It shows where water flows. In the right hands, it also shows who reads emails. I checked the level. I returned to the patio with a boring plastic case. No one noticed. Another model strode onto the diving board in a white suit that flashed like a lighthouse. I opened the case and slipped a small bottle into my pocket. Fighting on their schedule would make me difficult. Fighting on mine would make me unpredictable. Either way, the phone would ring. The trick was choosing where it landed. At the deep end I crouched, pretending to tie a shoe. I unscrewed the cap and let a careful stream of dye snake into the return current. The stream ribboned, caught the flow, and drew an emerald feather that bloomed like a rumor deciding to be true. People looked at the model because the microphone told them to. I looked at the feather. The model pivoted, saw the color, and lost a half beat. The water under her heels shifted from hotel blue to a shade that belonged in a fantasy brochure. Phones lifted. The emerald spread, meeting itself, turning the rectangle into proof that hydraulics do not care about press releases. Marla tried to sell it as production value. She grabbed the mic and announced a limited edition experience. The judges exchanged a glance. Green water is not dangerous if the green is clean. It is only dangerous to people who confuse spectacle for consent. The dye traced the flow like a map of my plumbing and showed how fast a crowd can change direction. Guests eased back from the edge without wanting to look like they were easing back. The model retreated. Sequins lost confidence. The crowd waited for direction, not moving yet. Marla finally looked at me the way a person looks at an alarm that will not be silenced. "What did you do?" she asked. I sipped lemonade and aligned the cups until they made a neat grid. I told her I had taken an interest in aesthetic. If she wanted to discuss it, we could start with the gate or the permit or my grass. "We will take a short pause," she told the crowd. The DJ turned the music down. Influencers argued in whispers. Sponsors pulled their brand reps into a tight circle. I watched the dye settle into an even shade that would read on every screen. I do not enjoy petty. I enjoy precise. The color was a letter delivered to the correct address. The day had started with strangers walking through my gate as if I were lucky to host them. It would not continue that way. I lifted the lemonade and thought of the folder on my desk. Inside that folder sat a map of today signed by the city, a property survey older than the HOA, and a clause no one on Marla's committee had bothered to read. The color was only the first sentence. When the break started, I expected people to mingle awkwardly and pretend they weren't questioning the wisdom of plunging into what now looked like the Emerald City's municipal pool. Instead, I watched a subtle exodus toward the valet stand. A few slipped out the side gate, feigning important phone calls. The influencers stayed, of course, a strange breed who would happily film themselves sipping tea in the middle of a house fire if it meant good lighting. Marla, however, was not retreating. She stalked across the deck toward me, sequins still glittering like she'd swallowed a disco ball whole. Her clipboard was clutched like a shield, and I could tell by the pinched set of her mouth that she was about to try something she thought was clever. "You're going to fix this," she said without preamble. I glanced at the pool, now a consistent and glorious jewel-toned green, rippling like a piece of silk under the sun. "What's broken?" I asked. "The color," she hissed. "This isn't the color we approve." I took a slow sip of lemonade. "Did you approve a color?" "Of course we did," she said, flipping through her clipboard. "The aesthetic palette for this event is white, turquoise, and gold. Turquoise water, white runway, gold accent. Your interference violates the event guidelines." "It's interesting," I said, because I was under the impression that this was my pool, my backyard, and my property, and the only guidelines here are the ones that stop people from parking SUVs on my sprinkler head. Marla's jaw worked as if she were chewing on something bitter. Her voice dropped, the way people do when they think intimidation works better, in a whisper. "This is a community event. The HOA has the authority to enforce community presentation standards, and if you keep this up, you're going to find yourself fined, sanctioned, and possibly facing legal action for damages." I leaned slightly closer. "Damages? For a change in water color?" "For interfering with a contracted event," she said. "And public embarrassment." "Public embarrassment?" I repeated, arching an eyebrow. "Because I'd say you're doing a fine job of that all by yourself." The DJ, who'd been lurking nearby, leaned over to her. "Should we just keep going?" he asked nervously. Marla nodded curtly. "Yes. The dye will dissipate eventually," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "The show must go on." And so it did. The next model emerged, clearly uncomfortable, but with the professional stiffness of someone who'd walked through worse. Her swimsuit was white with a long chiffon train, which now trailed behind her like a ghost caught in a swamp. Photographers clicked away because in their minds unusual was always better, especially if they could frame it as edgy in the captions. I stood back and watched, my mind already turning over possibilities. Green dye was a warm-up act. My patience was long, but my escalation curve was steep. If they wanted to commandeer my home without permission, then they would get the full experience of what that meant. I spotted Rob near the side fence, holding a bag from the hardware store. He caught my eye, grinned, and gave a small salute. "Your text said urgent," he murmured when he reached me. "So, what's the next move?" "For now, reconnaissance," I said. "Let's learn how deep this rabbit hole goes." While the models paraded and Marla pretended not to be rattled, I began my quiet circuit of the property. The caterers had taken over my entire outdoor kitchen. My cutting boards, my knives, my grill, all in use. They'd even moved my spice rack to the far counter, where some assistant was sprinkling paprika on skewers like it was confetti. I didn't say a word. I just made a mental note: replace everything. Beyond the patio, I saw they'd set up a VIP lounge under my maple tree. This was apparently a euphemism for random lawn furniture dragged from someone's garage, plus a few string lights that threatened to short out if a cloud passed overhead. I also saw coolers stocked with champagne I did not buy and, bizarrely, a large inflatable flamingo that had my cat perched suspiciously on top. The most interesting discovery was near the driveway, the event's so-called operations center. 2 HOA volunteers manned a folding table, where they kept clipboards, wristbands, and, most importantly, a cash box. Cash. That told me this wasn't just an innocent community showcase. This was a money-making operation, and given the lack of permits, the money was probably going somewhere far more personal than any community improvement fund. I returned to the deck just in time to hear Marla announce that the grand finale would feature all the models entering the pool for a synchronized swim-style photo op. Her voice was upbeat, but I caught the flicker in her eyes, the calculation of someone weighing whether the audience would notice if she just skipped that part. That's when I decided my next move. I slipped into the garage again, where my workshop sat in perfect order. On the back shelf was a container of eco-friendly pool enhancer, which in practice was a concentrated botanical extract I'd experimented with years ago. Perfectly safe, but with one unusual quirk: it turned foam, any foam, into an opaque, frothy mass. 5 minutes later, I returned to the poolside filter pump. A quick pour, a quiet stir with my skimmer pole, and the enhancer was circulating. Invisible for now. Lying in wait. Back at the deck, the finale began. Marla clapped her hands. The models lined up on the diving board and pool edges. A photographer counted down. 3, 2, 1, splash. The foam erupted instantly. It billowed across the surface, dense and snowy, until it looked like someone had poured cappuccino froth over an emerald sea. The models shrieked. The photographers scrambled for angles, but the foam swallowed the waterline in seconds. "What did you do now?" Marla demanded, her voice cracking. I shrugged. "Must be the community presentation standards you mentioned earlier." Within minutes, guests were leaving in droves. Sponsors whispered to each other. Someone at the operations center slammed the cash box shut. The HOA board members began huddling, clearly debating damage control. I caught bits of conversation. Refunds. PR spin. Possible liability. But I wasn't done. Because the foam and the green water were still just warnings, the equivalent of tapping someone on the shoulder before you throw the punch. The real move was coming, and it wouldn't just ruin Marla's event. It would make sure she never tried something like this again. That was when I spotted something I hadn't noticed before. A stack of HOA banners, all emblazoned with Lakeside Collective Presence, and the names of sponsors who definitely didn't know they were hosting this on stolen property. And tucked between them, I saw paperwork, printed contracts, signed receipts, and handwritten note. It was all sitting on my patio table, unguarded. If I could get those papers, I wouldn't just have the leverage to shut down this fiasco. I'd have the ammunition to dismantle the very game Marla had been running on this neighborhood for years. I glanced at Rob. He caught the direction of my gaze and smirked. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Exactly," I said. "And it's going to be a lot more satisfying than green water." Rob and I didn't need a spoken plan. Years of neighborly disasters trained us in quiet choreography. I create distraction, he creates opportunity. The foam churned across my pool, keeping cameras busy. I drifted to the patio table with HOA banners and smoothed a corner like a helpful host. People rarely question the calm, territorial one. The paperwork sat in a clear bin. On top were sponsor sheets and an insurance certificate naming Lakeside Collective at the clubhouse address. Under that, a venue agreement for my yard with a signature almost like mine and a notary seal that looked borrowed. I photographed everything and texted Clara, "Verify notary 7C42. She replied in 20 seconds, "Retired 2 years ago. Any new use is fraud." At the driveway, the valet clipped my mailbox. Heads turned, including Marla's. I slid a stack of the most useful pages into a grocery bag and replaced the weight with HOA brochures. Archivists call that conservation. Pirates say treasure. I am an archivist with timing. The finale dissolved into foam. A model slipped on the step and sat hard. I offered a towel and a steady arm. "Bathrooms inside on the right, mind the tile." She whispered thanks and escaped. Spectacle was becoming regret. Momentum shifted. Marla called the intermission immersive. The DJ asked when he'd be paid. A volunteer at the folding table answered later with the confidence that exists 5 minutes before never. Rob wandered to the operations center, admired wristbands, and began an aimless, sunny conversation about pricing. The treasurer guarding the cash box spoke in numbers that didn't add. I narrated a memo to myself. 237, unpermitted assembly, cords across wet deck, fog machine on metal chair, obstructed gates. I'm not a cop. I'm a historian who writes the report before the event remembers what it did. Then a city inspector walked through my gate with a notebook, followed by a fire marshal. Someone had called, sponsor, neighbor, or board member newly allergic to liability. The inspector took in cords, crowd, and foam. His smile left. "Who owns the property?" he asked. I raised my hand. "Who is the organizer?" Marla lifted her clipboard like a crown. "Permits," he said. She produced HOA letters. "Permits," he repeated, slower. She produced volume. The marshal pointed at the overloaded splitter, cords in water paths, absence of posted occupancy, blocked gate. He wrote. The inspector asked if the pool was closed and who added chemicals. Performance art hovered on my tongue and chose not to land. "This is a private residence," I said. "No city permit exists. I did not consent, and that signature isn't mine." I showed the photo and Clara's text. His eyebrows rose a millimeter. "We're shutting this down," the marshal said. Marla attempted gratitude. "Safety first. We were concluding anyway." The DJ asked about his check. The caterer chimed in. A sponsor's rep asked where brand placement would live now. The treasurer hugged the cash box like a raft. I asked the inspector a question meant for the HOA board pretending to be landscaping. If a non-profit runs an unpermitted ticketed event at a private home and someone gets hurt, who is liable? He answered like an encyclopedia. The organizer, the non-profit, any negligent parties. Absent consent, the homeowner is a complainant. A fresh page appeared in his notebook. The marshal taped a notice to my gate. Event closed by order of fire authority. Not victory, but punctuation. Guests shuffled the way people move when they were never there. The flamingo sighed and sagged. My cat stepped off, offended. I fetched the old property survey from my workbench. It predates the HOA and carries a line I love. No easement shall be presumed across this parcel except by recorded instrument. I set it on the table where banners had been. Marla stared as if a horoscope refused to predict a claim. Here's what happens next, I said. You will send a written apology admitting the HOA staged an unpermitted event without consent, that a retired notary seal appears on a fabricated venue agreement, and that all funds will be itemized and refunded within 5 business days. You will also circulate a notice clarifying there is no event easement across my property. If you refuse, I'll file complaints with code enforcement, the recorder, the notary board, the AG's consumer division, and every sponsor. That's extortion, she said. No, I said. Courtesy. Extortion would be me asking for the cash box. I am not. Yet. The treasurer tried to slide the box into a tote. Rob coughed to hide a laugh. The inspector took the treasurer's name and number. He misremembered his own number before correcting it. The marshal looked away to keep his face from speaking. Marla steadied herself on denial. We'll consult counsel. In the meantime, you are cited for damaging the pool with dye and interfering with HOA activities. Wonderful, I said. Put it in writing. Send it certified. Include counsel's bar number and your insurer's claim contact. And bring your notary. Her eyes flicked to the bin, which now held brochures and very little paper that mattered. She calculated the cost of bluster versus the cost of document. I still had one card and used it on speaker. I called the swimsuit boutique listed as a sponsor. I summarized the day, the lack of permits, the forged signature, and asked if she had authorized her logo on a backyard runway. Absolutely not, she said. Pull our name immediately. Expect counsel to reach out by morning. I thanked her and ended the call. The treasurer sat on a cooler like a man realizing the chair had been sawed through. Marla's smile attempted apology and stopped at adjacent. We can discuss terms, she said. I'm sure there's a way to resolve this quietly. There will be no drama, I said. Only documentation. The inspector's notes, the marshal's order, the survey, the notary record. And one more thing. A black SUV turned into my driveway and stopped with blueprint precision. The deputy city attorney stepped out with a folder and the expression of a person summoned by overlapping complaint. Good afternoon, he said. I received calls from Code, Fire, and 2 sponsors, plus emails with attachments. He looked at Marla, then at me, then at the green pool. Is there a dispute about consent? He asked. Yes, I said. No, Marla said. Perfect, he replied, because disputes create records. He opened the folder. Inside was the HOA newsletter paragraph claiming implied easement over neighbor amenities. This is inaccurate and has drawn prior warnings, he said. He turned a page. And this notary number was retired in 2023. Think of the neighborhood, Marla said. This will make us look divided. We are divided, I said. Between consent and entitlement. I'm choosing the side that reads before it signs. The deputy nodded. Interim recommendation, he said. The HOA will issue a retraction and apology within 48 hours, suspend event activity pending review, and preserve all records. Failure triggers fines and a referral for fraud investigation. He looked at me. You will itemize property damage and send it to this address. He slid a card across the table. Also, shut your pump and leave the water as is until samples are taken. With pleasure, I said. The crowd was gone. Tape fluttered. Foam thinned to lace. It should have felt finished. Instead, a deeper gear engaged. Because tucked in my bag, beneath the venue agreement, was a second document I had barely skimmed. A draft amendment granting the HOA president temporary presentation compliance entry onto listed properties. Today's date. 4 addresses. Mine first. Rob's third. Today wasn't a one-off. It was a pilot. And I was ready to. I sat at my kitchen table with the bag of stolen paperwork spread like a card game, each page a different kind of bad idea. The amendment was the worst. 4 targeted addresses, mine included, granting presentation compliance, entry rights for special community events. It wasn't law yet, but the signatures told me it was already moving. 2 board members, the HOA secretary, and, naturally, Marla. They dated it for next week's board vote. If it passed, today's trespass would become legal precedent, gift-wrapped in HOA language that made it sound like they were doing us a favor. I called Rob over. He arrived with his own coffee and a grin that meant he'd been thinking the same thing I had. This wasn't over, this was just Act 2. He scanned the page and whistled. So they're trying to legalize home invasion with bunting and a snack table? Basically, I said. But they're not there yet. And if we play this right, they'll never get there. Clara arrived next, still in scrubs, smelling faintly of antiseptic and coffee. She looked at the pile of papers, then at me. Please tell me you're going nuclear. More surgical than nuclear, I said. We need them to self-destruct in the middle of their own spotlight. We started with a timeline. The next HOA meeting was in 4 days, at the clubhouse. According to the posted agenda, the amendment was item number 6, buried between budget review and beautification committee update. That meant they'd try to slide it past anyone who'd stayed long enough to care about light fixtures. Classic maneuver. Hide the controversial thing in the middle when everyone's tired. But today's chaos had given us leverage. Sponsors were mad. The city was watching. The fire marshal's report would be filed by morning. And we had proof of forged documents and unpermitted events. If we combined that with public outrage, they'd be forced to either withdraw the amendment or watch it die in flames. The problem was attendance. HOA meetings rarely drew more than a handful of residents, most of whom came for free cookies or to complain about weeds. We needed a crowd, loud, informed, and ready to vote. That's when Clara suggested something devious. You know all those group chats we have for neighborhood watch, yard sales, and lost pets? We accidentally drop a few choice screenshots in all of them. Rob grinned. Screenshots of what? I pointed to the fake venue agreement, the notary info Clara had verified, and the event flyer with my address photoshopped in as Lakeside Club. We'd redact sensitive stuff, of course, but enough to make people ask questions. Questions lead to attendance. Attendance leads to pressure. By that evening, the first ripple hit. Someone posted a "Did anyone know about this?" thread on the community forum with the flyer attached. By morning, it had over 50 comments, ranging from "I thought that was the clubhouse" to "Wait, they went into your yard without permission?" and "Can they even do that?" Several were already talking about showing up to the meeting, just to hear the drama. Perfect. The day before the meeting, I got an email from Marla. Subject: Urgent clarification. The body was pure damage control. While recent events may have caused misunderstandings, the HOA is committed to fostering community spirit through inclusive, vibrant events. She claimed the pool show was a mutual arrangement that unfortunately became subject to unforeseen logistical issues. She ended with a line about future opportunities to collaborate. I forwarded it to the city inspector, the deputy city attorney, and the boutique owner who'd called me furious. No commentary, just for your files. A paper trail is a beautiful thing. Meeting night arrived like a storm front. I walked into the clubhouse to find standing room only. People were spilling into the hallway, murmuring in clusters. The usual stack of free cookies was gone in a minute. The board members looked nervous, though they hid it behind the brittle cheer of people about to present a PowerPoint to a firing squad. Marla opened with her standard greeting and zipped through the first few agenda items at record speed. I could see her eyes flick to the crowd, then to her watch, calculating how much attention she could burn off before item 6. But the crowd wasn't thinning. If anything, more people kept arriving. By the time she reached Presentation Compliance Amendment, the room had gone still. This proposed amendment, she began, is simply a formality to ensure that community events can be executed with consistency and... Why does it list specific addresses? Someone called from the back. Her smile froze. The addresses listed are potential volunteer hosts. I didn't volunteer, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Heads turned toward me. Several others chimed in. Neither did I, said Rob. A woman near the front raised her hand. You have my address on there. I've never even met you. Marla tried to regain control, flipping to a slide with legal-sounding text. This is merely preliminary. Clara stood up, holding a printout. Is this preliminary too? Because this is a venue agreement for my brother's property, signed by a notary who retired 2 years ago. A ripple went through the crowd. Marla's voice tightened. That document is unrelated to this. No, I said. It's exactly related. It's how you justified trespassing on my property last weekend for your unpermitted ticketed event. Which, by the way, is under investigation by the city and the fire department. Murmurs turned into full-blown chatter. Someone shouted, We want a vote. Marla looked to the board for backup. The treasurer was busy avoiding eye contact. The secretary was studying her nails. Finally, the vice president cleared his throat and said, Given the concerns raised, I move that we table this amendment pending legal review. The motion got seconded before Marla could object. Hands shot up in favor, nearly the whole room. The motion passed just like that. Item 6 was dead for now. But I wasn't leaving without the final blow. I stepped forward. One more thing. I think everyone here deserves to know that the so-called Lakeside Collective you've been hearing about is not a registered nonprofit. It's a name Marla uses on event flyers to make them look official. The money collected at last weekend's event, cash, was not deposited into the HOA account. Gasp. A few people started recording on their phones. I let the silence stretch before adding, and if anyone here bought a ticket or sponsorship, you should be asking where that money went. Marla's face drained of color. She tried to speak, but the boutique owner, who'd slipped in quietly, stood up in the back and said, We're already in touch with our attorney. That was my cue to sit down. The meeting unraveled into chaos after that, residents demanding audits, board members whispering frantically, someone asking if we could recall the president. I didn't need to push it further. The avalanche was already rolling downhill. Outside afterward, people were buzzing, talking about petitions and transparency and finally doing something. Rob clapped me on the shoulder. You realize she's going to come after you now, right? Let her, I said. I'm not done either. Because tucked away in my folder was one last document I hadn't shown anyone yet, an email thread between Marla and a certain local lifestyle magazine offering exclusive photo rights to next month's garden gala at a stunning lakeside estate. The estate? My house. Date? 2 weeks from now. She was going to try again. And this time, I wouldn't just turn the water green. I'd turn her whole operation inside out. 2 weeks is a long time if you're counting days, but it's an instant if you're planning something elaborate. And I wasn't just planning to stop Marla's garden gala. I was going to end the HOA's habit of treating my property like a public park with better landscaping. By the time I was done, she wouldn't dare host so much as a bake sale within sight of my fence. Step 1 was letting her think she was ahead. I didn't confront her about the email to the lifestyle magazine. I didn't send a cease and desist. I wanted her fully invested, time, money, ego, before the floor vanished under her. And she bit hard. Within days, I noticed strangers measuring my side yard, someone staking the grass near the driveway, and a floral delivery van dropping off buckets of lilies on my porch without knocking. I signed for them, of course. They made my kitchen smell great. Step 2 was information. I called the magazine, posing as a potential advertiser, curious about the gala coverage. The rep was chatty. Yes, the event would feature a live string quartet, artisanal catering, and exclusive brand activations on a private lawn with lake views. Yes, the magazine's crew had already scouted the location. No, she didn't have the homeowner's name, but the HOA president is handling all the details. I thanked her and hung up, knowing enough to design my trap. Step 3 was permits, but mine, not hers. I applied to the city for a private landscape treatment and pest control demonstration, which in reality meant I had official permission to apply certain biodegradable but visually dramatic treatments to my property. Harmless to people, pets, and plants, but the effect on a manicured garden is not subtle. I scheduled it for the morning of the gala. The day before the event, Marla was on my driveway with a clipboard and a crew of volunteers in matching polos. They were unloading folding chairs, draping white fabric over archways, and hanging banners that read Lakeside Collective Garden Gala. My lawn looked like it had been swallowed by a bridal magazine. "Nice setup," I said from the porch, coffee in hand. She barely glanced at me. "Just remember, tomorrow we'll need clear access from the front to the back. Guests will be arriving in the afternoon." I smiled. "Don't worry. Everything will be ready." The morning of the gala, a pest control truck rolled up at 7 a.m. Two techs in uniforms unloaded sprayers and bags of bright green granules, part of my approved demonstration. They worked methodically, dusting every inch of the lawn, garden beds, and decorative planters. By the time they were done, my property looked like it had been carpeted in neon moss. The tech handed me the signed permit and a flyer explaining that the color would fade in 48 hours, leaving behind only a pest repellent barrier. At 11 a.m., the magazine's photographer arrived to prep shots. He took one look at the scene and froze. Is the lawn supposed to be that color?" "Absolutely," I said cheerfully. "It's part of a pest control demonstration. Totally safe, city approved." I showed him the permit. He muttered something about adjusting the shot list, and walked off, looking like someone had just told him the wedding cake was made of tofu. By noon, guests began arriving: sponsors, local socialites, and the same influencer crowd from the pool fiasco. They stepped out of SUVs in heels and designer loafers, staring at the glowing green lawn like it might stain their souls. A string quartet gamely started playing near the back fence, but the effect was surreal: elegant music over a yard that looked like it belonged in a radioactive zone. Marla appeared in a cream suit, her smile a little too tight. "What is this?" she hissed. "Demonstration," I said. "I told you everything would be ready." "This is not ready," she snapped. "We have press here. Sponsors." "I have a city permit," I said, tapping the document in my pocket. "It's my property." The timing was perfect for me. She looked like she wanted to explode, but the guests were watching, and she couldn't risk a scene. Instead, she tried to pivot. "Let's move everyone to the patio," she told her volunteers. Ah yes, the patio, where, 2 hours earlier, I'd had Rob deliver the piece de resistance. A dozen large planters filled with ornamental cabbages sprayed with a harmless but highly aromatic organic fertilizer. The scent hit the crowd like a low fog as soon as they stepped onto the stone. Conversations faltered. The quartet soldiered on, but one of the violinists kept wrinkling her nose between notes. The magazine crew was frantic, trying to frame shots that didn't show the lawn or catch the guests' midwinds. The caterer pulled me aside. "We can't set up the buffet out here. The smell will kill it. Do you have indoor space?" "Nope," I said pleasantly. "House is closed today." Marla was circling like a shark in shallow water, clearly realizing that every minute the event went on, her credibility sank deeper. But I wasn't done. Because I'd also invited some guests of my own: the deputy city attorney, the fire marshal, and the city inspector, all of whom just happened to be in the neighborhood, and thought they'd check in on the site of a recent unpermitted event. They arrived together, clipboards in hand, and began quietly documenting everything: the tent pitched too close to the property line, the blocked driveway, the lack of visible occupancy postings. When Marla saw them, her composure finally cracked. She pulled me aside, speaking through gritted teeth. "You've sabotaged this on purpose." I sipped my lemonade. "I've simply hosted my own legal, permitted activity. If it doesn't match your vision, perhaps you should have asked before planning a public event on private property." Again. Her eyes narrowed. "You think you've won?" I smiled. "No. I think you've just lost. At 3:15, the first sponsor quietly packed up their display and left. By 3:30, two more followed. The magazine crew shut down early, muttering about reshoots at a different venue. The quartet stopped mid-song and began packing their instruments. Guests streamed out, some openly laughing, others looking embarrassed to have been there at all. And then came the final blow. One of the HOA board members, the vice president who'd motioned to table the amendment, stepped up to Marla in full view of the remaining guests and said, loudly enough for half the yard to hear, "Consider this your last event as president. We have the signatures for a recall vote." Marla's face went slack. She looked around, but there was no saving this scene. She left without a word, clipboard hanging at her side like a white flag. By sunset, my yard was empty except for a few folding chairs and the fading green glow of the granules. Rob came over with a beer. That, he said, was art. Clara joined us, tossing a bag of chips on the table. Think she'll try again? No, I said. She'll be too busy explaining herself to the board, the sponsors, and probably the city. And if she's smart, she'll spend the rest of her term hiding from the neighbors. We sat in the quiet, the lake glinting gold in the last light. The HOA might still exist, but the illusion of their untouchable authority had taken a permanent hit. People had seen that you could push back and win. As the granules began to fade to their natural color, I leaned back in my chair and thought about my pool, my yard, my freedom from surprise fashion shows and garden galas. It was, in its own way, the most satisfying shade of green I'd ever seen.